Welcome back to our special coverage of the Noor Salman trial here on ClickOrlando.com. I'm Ginger Gadsden. There are new developments tonight as jury selection just wrapped up for its third day. As of right now, 22 people are now in the potential jury pool. At least 8 people were dismissed by the judge for prior commitments. The judge hopes to get the number of jurors up to 60 people by the end of the week. And just minutes ago, we heard from Noor Salman's attorney, Linda Moreno. She says despite the slow jury process and many potential jurors having connections to polls, she remains hopeful.
Noor is deeply, deeply grateful. We feel confident we're going to have a fair jury.
You think you'll have a jury by the end of the week?
I don't know. It really depends. Sometimes it goes faster on some days and sometimes not. Hard to tell.
So let's get to News 6 investigator Mike DeForest. And Mike, you just minutes ago broke new details on a motion filed by the defense about what Omar Mateen was doing just hours before the attack.
This is some pretty eye-opening stuff, Ginger. Now, in just a few moments, we're going to be explaining what the purpose of this defense motion was, but I really want to get to some of the details that the defense team outlines in it. Basically, for the first time ever, we are learning that just minutes before the Pulse nightclub attack, there is evidence suggesting the gunman, Omar Mateen, may have actually been headed to a different downtown Orlando nightclub, a nightclub that does not specifically cater to the LGBT community. Let me give you a little bit of a rundown of Omar Mateen's timeline according to this new defense motion, which they say is all backed up by the evidence. We have a little bit of video of Disney Springs if you want to take a look at this. According to the defense, they say that there is surveillance video showing that at 10 o'clock at night before the Pulse attack, 4 hours before the nightclub attack, Omar Mateen was at Disney Springs. After he was there for about a half hour, he must pull out his mobile device and Googles the term Disney Springs. Then, a half hour later, 11 o'clock at night, Omar Mateen reportedly Googles the term Disney World while he's not too far from Epcot. Then, at 12:21 in the morning, the day of the Pulse nightclub attack, we're talking about an hour and a half before he opens fire at the nightclub, Omar Mateen reportedly Googles the term downtown Orlando nightclubs. 2 Google results pop up. The first one, Eve Orlando, a nightclub in downtown Orlando that does not specifically cater to the LGBT community. The second nightclub on that Google search list was Pulse. Well, at 1:33 in the morning, less than an hour before the attack, the defense says that this evidence is going to show that Omar Mateen was actually driving towards the Eve nightclub, presumably using cell phone pings. They could tell he started to drive there, and in fact, they say he did a Google search for directions on how to get to Eve nightclub. But then, just a few minutes later, at 1:37 in the morning, they say Omar Mateen turned around and headed to the Pulse nightclub, where he carried out that attack less than 30 minutes later, murdering 49 people. So these are the big developments, the big details that are coming out of this. I am joined by legal analyst Mark O'Mara. Obviously, I'm looking at this first as a citizen of Orlando who's kind of followed this and just kind of learning new details about the night. But what's also important about this motion is the reason the defense team is filing this now. And to just summarize real quick, it's because they do not want prosecutors mentioning during opening statements that Omar Mateen may have been targeting a gay nightclub.
You know, it's interesting. Right now, we're spending the next week trying to make sure that we have a jury that is fair and impartial and is minimal in their contact to bad information about this case, right? Any pretrial publicity. And now what we see is the defense is saying, Judge, tell the government not to talk about information that they cannot prove. Keep it away from their opening statement. In one sense, it's a very limited motion. Judge, just tell them not to talk about it because it seems like they can't prove it. Because the problem is once the government gets that out into the jurors' minds, it's there. And now there's going to be a filter for everything else. Now, of course, if they say something in opening and don't prove it, then in closing argument, we can expect the defense to tell the jury that. But we don't want to go anywhere near that. This evidence, if presumed to be true by what the defense is presenting forward, means, in my opinion, the judge should limit the government not to talk about any of this evidence. Let's just wait until the evidence, to the extent it comes out, is actually before the jury.
And just to kind of break this down, so what the defense is basically throwing out the dots to be connected is that perhaps Omar Mateen was heading for this other nightclub, one not specifically catering to the LGBT community, and that perhaps then this speculation that he was targeting the gay community should not even be brought up during opening statements. They don't say it in this motion, but I would imagine the reason they don't want that is that could potentially be inflammatory to some jurors.
It's going to be very inflammatory, and it gives sort of this perspective. Don't forget what the government is trying to do now is to take everything that Mateen was doing and place it on the shoulders of Salman, including the focus on the gay community. Well, if that's not appropriate, if that wasn't what he was doing, if it was pure coincidence that he didn't go to Eve, he went to Pulse, then they don't want that shouldered onto Salman because of the negative connotations of all of that. So again, what they're saying is, Judge, don't forget, opening is not evidence. It is only a roadmap to what the government may present. So let's be very careful giving this jury anything that the government may not be able to prove.
Now, in their quest not to have the prosecutors mention during opening statements that this may have been a target towards the gay community, the defense also points out some evidence about what Noor Salman, the defendant in this case, may or may not have been doing in the days leading up to the Pulse attack. Now, just to give a little bit of background, they are accusing her of aiding and abetting Omar Mateen. And one of the reasons they say that she aided her husband in carrying out this attack is that they say she scouted out locations with him prior to the attack. They specifically mentioned that she had visited Disney Springs, downtown Disney, with her husband, and also visited an entertainment district in West Palm Beach. Now, there has also been this, they call it a confession, is a written statement that Noor Salman made to the FBI shortly after the attack, in which she says, I, Noor Salman, actually joined my husband in the car and we drove around Pulse nightclub for about 20 minutes. And this reportedly happened just a few days before the attack. Well, in this new motion, the defense is trying to show that perhaps Noor Salman was not even near the Pulse nightclub, despite what she told the FBI. And what they show, they're claiming that there are cell phone records. They're going to put Noor Salman and Omar Mateen at the Florida Mall a couple days before. They say there's surveillance video showing them in Victoria's Secret at Florida Mall a couple days before the attack. But that the window of opportunity for them to leave the Florida Mall, head up to Pulse nightclub, and then come back to Florida Mall without the cell phone towers catching their movement, they say it's impossible, which means maybe she didn't go to Pulse after all.
It seems so, and more important than that, in my opinion, it also really brings to the forefront the concern that the FBI did not take an audio tape or a videotape of this alleged or supposed confession. Because now we have to rely on what the FBI said she said, and nothing personal that we can see from her voice or from her face. So that's going to be now more of a concern for the jury to look at.
And now this motion does not get into it, but we do know from other defense filings that they're going to allege that Noor Salman was the victim of domestic abuse, and that the abuse was so great that she may have been more susceptible to making a false confession. And although they don't outline it in this newly filed motion, here we have a case where they're saying Noor Salman told the FBI, hey, me and my husband, we basically drove around Pulse nightclub, but then the defense says, hey, we looked at the cell phone pings, and it is darn near impossible for her to have made that trip as she alleges. And perhaps if this does get introduced, they might be able to suggest that, hey, she told the FBI something that doesn't even match the evidence.
A lot more to come.
Well, Mark O'Mara, we really appreciate your analysis on this.
Sure.
This is, I think, going to be a bombshell for the Central Florida community who, up until this time, for the last year and a half or so, has really been under the speculation belief that Omar Mateen may have just been targeting Pulse because of perhaps a grudge for the LGBT community. But the defense is suggesting that the evidence may show otherwise. So we're going to send it back to you, Ginger. Forgive us. Our earpieces went out, so I'm not going to be able to talk back to you. But we are going to continue watching jury selection for the rest of this week. And the attorneys really hope to begin opening statements perhaps sometime in the middle of next week. Ginger.
Stunning and chilling developments. Mike, thank you. Our coverage continues on clickorlando.com. We have a special page detailing everything with this trial on clickorlando.com/Noor Salman trial. Join us tomorrow morning for another discussion. Our coverage begins at 8:30 right here on clickorlando.com. Thanks for joining us tonight. I'm Ginger Gadsden. Have a good night.